Well, the time is just gone, 8 minutes to 5. As we continue on the Iftar Drive this afternoon, right here on Salam Media, and taking a look at the government officially ending the state of disaster for the power crisis. Now, we won't question the fact as to why was there a state of disaster for the power crisis in the first instance and what was actually achieved. And this is the reason why we are talking this afternoon with Connie Mulder, who is the head of the Solidarity Research Institute, just to understand, what the wisdom is, what the thinking was behind the state of disaster and why call it off right now. Connie, good afternoon to you, sir, and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Nice to be here.
Yes, this came as I'm not too sure whether it's come as a surprise, but this state of disaster for the power crisis that was called and it was done with so much fanfare. There was just so much that the president had to say, and everybody was wondering what is likely to happen. Now, suddenly, out of the blue, abruptly, we see the state of disaster ending. Just your thoughts, your thinking, Connie?
I would argue it's not nearly as out of the blue as we would think. This is directly due to the pending litigation that was on its way. Shortly after the Easter weekend, we would have had the first meeting with the judge, and from what we can tell from the opposing affidavit of government, they were dead in the water and they knew it. They knew it before declaring the state of disaster. All of this was just political theatre, and that means this is a preemptive strike to not lose in court with government in their letter to us from the Attorney General, not only saying that they would have withdrawn the state of disaster, but also offering to pay all our legal costs if we withdraw the case. So obviously that's the direction we're going now. There's no more state of disaster, but like with the COVID state of disaster, we have once again had to force government into doing the right thing, and it's due to the unrelenting pressure of the civil society that we're luckily dodging this bullet.
Well, certainly, and also, I like the way you call it political theater because this is exactly what it was. All the fanfare that basically accompanied it, and the president making the announcement, everybody wondering what was happening, and having learned some very bitter lessons from the state of disaster during the COVID era. This time around, there were even a greater concern as to how this government would actually manage the state of disaster.
No, exactly. We're of the opinion if you're a bad builder, giving you a bigger hammer is not going to make a better building. It's just going to be more damage, and that is what government gave themselves with the state of disaster. Is they gave themselves the biggest hammer, and we saw what damage this can do during COVID-19. Giving government unfettered power over something like the energy crisis is not a recipe for success. What bothers us, and that is, I think, the thing that really should anger people, is government is implicitly admitting that they've always had the instruments to get us out of load shedding. They do not need any new legislative instruments, which then implies they've just not used them. No new legislation was passed. Suddenly we've got government saying, well, we do have the instruments that we need. But then they've had them for almost 10 years and they've done nothing to end this crisis, which is what the part where we get really angry, saying we knew that government had existing legislative instruments. They have more than enough to get us out of load shedding. And that simply means we're in load shedding because we want to be here. There's no reason for us to still be in an electricity crisis.
And also, Connie, if one looks at the reasoning that the government has now given with regard to why we don't need the state of disaster, is they say that they've done enough as a government and to deal with the energy crisis. And do you buy that reasoning?
No, not for a moment. They've done nothing. That's the answer. Is that the things that they've done are things that were possible 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even. And no regulation was passed under the state of disaster that would in any way accelerate getting out of the electricity crisis. What has happened is we've moved from stage 6. We're in stage 4 still, so load shedding is still with us. A government reasoning just doesn't make any sense. In the press conference, they also state, well, we review the state of disaster every 30 days. But that's not, this wasn't terminated on 30 days. It was terminated on this arbitrary date. And it's solely because they were going to lose a court case. Where our position has been the same from the very start is we do not need a state of disaster. Government has the necessary legislative instruments to withdraw the regulations that are preventing private sector generation. Government's role in the energy crisis should simply be getting out of the way, allowing the private and the community sector to solve this problem, allowing people who want to produce energy to do it and allowing them to connect to the grid easily and then sell this energy to customers who want to pay for it. Just like any other consumer good, there's no reason we should be in this electricity crisis anymore. We've had the tools for the last 10 years with government just not being able to wield them. Giving government more power is not going to solve it. It's just going to create more damage. And that is why we're welcoming the withdrawal of this disaster, but we're quite angry that we once again had to go all the way to the steps of the High Court to get government to do what they should have done 10 years ago.
Well, this is exactly the problem, Connie. And, without going to the courts, not much is being achieved. And even when these type of decisions are actually taken by government, and even looking at what it accompanied the state of disaster, looking at the measures that were taken, I mean, these were insignificant. They meant absolutely nothing. We've seen a few draft regulations coming up. And without that, there was just a lot more talk, a lot of hot air being blown and nothing else.
Exactly, and I think that's the part that solidifies it as solely political theatre. Is none of the regulations had any real impact. The stuff that did have an impact is entertained in the PFMA or in existing environmental legislation. So all of this was already possible, which begs the question: when Medupi's chimney stack then fell in November last year and we lost 2,500 megawatts, why wasn't an environmental exemption granted immediately? Why did we wait until April the next year to do these things and to get and basically just delay getting 2,500 megawatts back into the grid by 4 or 5 months? None of this makes sense, but this has been characteristic of government's handling of the energy crisis. Is you've got incompetent people at the best, corrupt people at worst, who are insisting on playing the central role in managing a crisis that they created and that they have no idea how to get out of. The only way out of the energy crisis, from Solidarity's point of view, is decentralizing power generation. The solution lies on the roofs of millions of South African citizens, not in the corridors of power, as we've seen thus far. And that means government should be incentivizing small-scale generation at massive scale. They should be forcing NERSA to publish a feed-in tariff or a wheeling tariff that enables private commercial players to properly plan for what will it cost to transfer electricity over the grid to paying consumers. And then we should desperately look at distribution and making sure that we can get these electrons to clients. Government's role should solely be ensuring that the private sector can operate here and solve this crisis for us. It has been suggested 16 years ago as the solution. Government has steadfastly refused, and now that we're in the crisis of this magnitude, suddenly they're trying to look like they're doing something, but in effect, they've done nothing but simply delay the solutions once again by 2 more months.
Well, Connie, I know you've got to run. It is 5 p.m. And as always, we do appreciate you taking time out and talking to us here at Salam Media and providing us with the updates that we so much look forward to. So all the best to you, sir, and please take care.
No problem. Thanks for the time.
Connie Mulder with us with Solidarity this afternoon against the scrapping of the state of disaster by the government. And again, this begs the question, what was actually achieved in the short time that the state of disaster was declared? And Connie Mulder calls it political theater. This is exactly what it was. The time is just gone, 5 p.m. We're going to go for a break. We'll be back. We still have got a lot more to unpack from now right until the time you start in Johannesburg.